started the engine first, so the car is still on the stock turbo, and it has all the bolt-ons. It has multi-port injection, and it also has an upgraded low-pressure fuel pump, and that's all getting us ready for a larger turbo that's going to make its way into the car. And I'm really a huge fan of this turbo. If you upgraded it, in your GTI, MK7 GTI, or you just use it in your R, it is a very, very responsive turbo and very well suited for this engine. But the only area perhaps that you'll find it lacking is a bit in the top end. And for example, right now we're climbing up. We're going to be close to 3,000 feet by the time we do this climb, and yeah, it runs out of steam a little bit, especially at high altitudes. So something to consider. You are going to give up some spool with a larger turbo, but you could gain some top end, and it all depends on what you want to do with the car. If you want the 10-second quarter-mile car, then perhaps a bigger turbo is really a necessity for you. But if you want the fun canyon car for your MK7R or GTI, there's nothing wrong with the IS38 turbo at all, and keeping it in there and just giving it some flow modifications. So we've got an exhaust, obviously, an intercooler, and we have an intake. The latter being the least important. And like I said, all the fueling upgrades. So if you want to run fully 85 on this car, I do recommend you go with MPI. It supplements the fueling. You don't have to worry about the injector headroom, and it really also keeps your valves cleaner, so it keeps the engine overall happier. And the intake pump, once you start kind of going that 450 horsepower level, then the intake pump becomes something that you want to put in there. So that's on the engine side. And of course, the calibration. So the calibration is very important. We do a lot of testing of our calibrations. We want to make sure that the throttle response is spot on, that the car behaves as it should at all altitudes and temperatures, driven hard, driven easy around the city. So that's something that we pay a lot of attention to, and we put a lot of seat time into. Now, this is a DSG car, as you can tell. I'm a big fan of manual cars. A lot of you guys are. But because the control is so good, even in manual mode, with the DSG transmission, it's hard to pass up such a good, what essentially is an automated manual transmission in these cars. So either way you go with these cars, it's not a bad thing. It's just that if you want that very fast acceleration, a straight line especially, and if you do, like I do, a lot of left foot braking, then going with the DSG is certainly not a bad thing. The transmission calibration that's on this car is something that's we also develop in-house, and we focus a lot on not just firming up the shifts and speeding them up, but also on the shift points in drive mode, in sport mode. And when I'm driving like this, I like to take full control of the transmission. That's just my style. But we do spend a lot of time in refining how the transmission will behave when you do leave it in automatic, so that it is as responsive and as intuitive as possible. So moving on from the drivetrain, we've done some suspension modifications on this car. One of the things that a lot of modern cars suffer from is a bit of lack of steering feel. Not precision, just feel, feedback. As I'm going through these S's, what are my front tires doing? And it's something that some suspension geometry changes will certainly help. And what we've done on this car that's helped a lot is that we have a set of coilovers of camber plates on front. We run about -3 degrees of camber on the bushings in the front control arms. So now we've got about 9 degrees of caster in the front, and that helps a lot. So that just completes the front end. The sway bar is stock. I don't feel the need to really be changing the sway bar in the front, because that just is going to limit grip more. And instead I did upgrade the sway bar in the back. It is a white line sway bar. It's set to stiff, and it doesn't make this car into an oversteering machine. What it does do is it helps it helps balance it out through a corner. So at the absolute limit, and we're on street tires here. We're on Michelin PS4S tires. So at the absolute limit, the car will tend to push under acceleration as you're, for example, coming out of a corner. But you also want stability in these, for example, in these longer sweepers at higher speeds. So that's something that you don't want to make the backhand so lively that it's going to step out on you or feel uncomfortable. And the way that the chassis is set up with the additional cast in the front, the camber in the front, and the sway bar in the rear, it's very, very nice and neutral and rewarding to drive through these corners. Of course, the torque is there from the engine, so we're getting up to that 3,000 foot mark here, and it's very nice and rewarding. You just always, even at 5,000 RPM, you've got a lot of torque to pull you through. The things that are still stock on the car, so we still have stock brakes, and that's something that I feel on a drive like this, on a daily commute, you may not feel this, but if you track the car or if you drive a little bit more aggressively in the canyon, it's something that you want to do. And we do have cooling ducts that we've added from the TTRS, which help in terms of cooling. I recommend those, but for pads right now we're still stock, and that's something that will change shortly here. So some comparisons. So this car gets compared a lot to the Focus RS, for example, and we tuned the Focus RS extensively, so we have a lot of seat time between these two cars. Funny enough, they're both white. And what can I tell you between the differences between the two, because we get asked this a lot. Now, the Focus RS feels like a chassis that's a little bit sharper than the Golf R, and that's for better or for worse, and depending on what you're looking for. This is going to be a little bit more comfortable on a daily commute. It feels very, very confidence inspiring in turns, and it feels like it's a car that is not going to, it does just everything so well, this car. The Focus RS is a little bit edgier coming out of the turn, because it does send power unevenly in terms of speed, front to rear. So the all-wheel drive feels a little bit more rear biased. The Focus RS doesn't feel like a rear-wheel drive car, but it is more rear biased, if you will. The front end feels a little bit sharper, so it's just a little bit sharper in terms of chassis. But I have to say that in terms of drivetrain, I find these E888 engines just better in terms of refinement, in terms of how the power comes on, in terms of how the power stays on. So if I were to have the perfect setup, if you will, I think that I would combine something like the Focus RS chassis and all-wheel drive system, and combine it with the engine and perhaps the DSG of this car. But we can't have it all, and both of these vehicles can definitely be enjoyed in their own way, and that's the important thing. So build your car to how you want to enjoy it, augment its capabilities, and get out there and enjoy it. And if there's ways that we can help you tune the car, we can help you set it up. These videos are intended to also give you ideas of how to go about those things. Then let us know, and